All right, welcome everyone. I'm Ken Mertzel. I'm the global industry leader for financial services automation anywhere. I've spent my whole career in finance, so I'm excited about today's topic about finance transformation. Most recently, I worked at Bank of America for 15 years, half of that as CFO of their insurance group, and then managed financial operations for the bank. So I spent a lot of time talking to our customers about how to apply the technology in finance, but fortunately today, I brought our customers to talk about how they're applying technology, so you won't hear a lot from me. Just a couple of introductory remarks. First of all, brought to you by our lawyers here, so just a reminder that we will be talking about some future capabilities today, so make any purchase decisions based on what's currently available in the market. With that, so I'm really excited about the topic because really most organizations actually start their automation journey in finance. And I think part of the reason is the fact that we have an integrated suite of capabilities, which most of you are very familiar with. And that's really critical when you're doing a lot of automation use cases within finance. So you often need process discovery to identify where you're going to automate, using document automation, where you have a lot of PDFs involved, process automation. And what's really exciting, and you've heard a lot about already today, is the ability to now easily within the platform infuse Gen AI. And so I think that's really opening up a whole new series of use cases that weren't possible before. And so we'll talk a little bit about that today as well. So in terms of our plan for today, basically hear from our customer speakers, who I'll introduce in a second. We'll spend about 30 minutes, and then we'll have a brief fireside chat. I'll just kick things off with some questions, but hopefully the main thing is you're all thinking about your own questions, so we do want to reserve a fair amount of time at the end for you to ask your own questions about to our customers about how to apply this technology in finance. So with that, let me introduce our speakers today. We have Alfredo Chevaliero, who is the CFO of Americas at GEA, and also Ram Kumar, who is the head of digital transformation. And so with that, I will hand it off to Alfredo.
I think I got
you
the mic.
got it.
Hope you can all hear me out there. Great. Excellent. If we can go to the, actually I need the, yeah, thank you. There we go. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about GEA. So GEA, we are a German company that operates across 100 countries, 18,000 employees all over the world, close to $6 billion in revenues, double-digit return on sales, a relatively large company for German standards, right? What do we do? So we operate in many industries, predominantly food, dairy, and beverage. Just to put it in context, when it comes to food, a third of the chicken nuggets in the world are made with our equipment. Half of the beer produced in the world is made with our equipment. And a quarter of the milk, if you consume milk, hopefully, it's produced with our equipment. We have some fairly ambitious goals ahead of us, and we've set those. Overall, our mission statement has been to deliver sustainable solutions for the nutritional and pharmaceutical industries. And in order to achieve those goals, we have anchored ourselves in 6 to 7 levers. 3 really around operational service and sales excellence. 3 on strategic initiatives or strategic focus areas. One of them is, I'm sure we've all been exposed to it, on what we call new food, which is mostly alternative proteins. GEA is uniquely positioned to help our customers deliver alternative protein solutions for the food industry. The third, the other initiative that we have is sustainability, which is something that we take dear and close to our heart. And the third one, which I'm going to speak to today as it relates to finance, is digitization. Now, our journey on digitization in the Americas really started with an ultimate goal of transforming the finance department to really become a strategic partner to the CEO, to the general manager, to the business. And in order to do that, we've had to leverage data that we have across all layers on the organization. That's where digital really comes into play, whether it's small data or big data, to really drive the performance of the business and improve the performance of the business, with the ultimate goal of changing the finance organization from being reactive, rear view mirror focus, to really forward-looking and more predictive. Now, when we started this journey, we had a fair share of challenges, which I'm sure that many folks here in the room can relate to. We had and we still deal with, a cluster of siloed systems that didn't necessarily speak to each other. We had processes that were fairly inconsistent, not really ironed out, and had to be streamlined. We had data that lacked governance altogether. And with the help of digitization and automation, we've been in a journey to really transform that. We started our journey, especially on the automation side, with the ultimate goal of improving our effectiveness in the finance team, to really improve and reduce the quality and the error rates that we had in different elements in the organization. Now, we started 3 years ago. Since then, I think very many of you here in the room have had to deal with the issue of talent acquisition and how hard it is to attract and retain talent. And what started as an effectiveness program for us really switched into a capacity augmentation. We have been able to leverage automation in the company as a way to really multiply and become a multiplier to the existing team that we have in place. So Ram Kumar is going to share with you now some of the business cases and use cases that we had as we embarked in this journey. Right.
Thank you, Alfredo. So our journey was, we started with some challenges, however, but the excitement developed over a period of time. Now the entire organization is looking forward towards RPA and AI. Now, talking about our journey on finance. Now, finance is the first playground for you to bring in any automation use cases, because you have this classic use case of invoice processing and vendor management. Now, these are some of the areas we cast a wide net when we're looking at automation. So which process to automate, what to automate. Now, since finance is closer to us, we cast a wide net across different processes and then try to get the organization realize the benefits of automation. Because seeing the benefits of automation is much better to convince the stakeholders than having them to visualize what automation can do for them. Now, this has built the excitement, and one example I want to talk about is the order-to-cash invoice automation. I think the last session, the CIO talked about order-to-cash challenges that we had, and we did have problems there where we had billing accuracy issues and capacity issues. Now, the first part that automation journey that we picked up was invoice automation, and we've delivered close to 6,000 plus hours capacity augmentation there. So that talks a lot about what RPA could do for it. Now, we had to sell the first use case, but successively, it was much more easier where the stakeholders, department managers are reaching out to us and saying, when can we embark on RPA journey? Now, first, evangelizing RPA was tough for us, because normally you would see IT talk about the tools and systems. Finance talking about automation was difficult, even for IT to understand how they could relate to the business process. So, and other than that, we were able to touch upon other areas on procure-to-pay, reporting, project reporting, and reconciliation, the classic examples of automation. Now, continuing our journey, coming from a quality background, being a black belt, our focus was more towards, is that the best way to do? Is that the optimal way to run the process? Because we were coming right after integration of our businesses across North America, which means we had to find opportunities to integrate all the processes and standardize them. So we always magnified the processes and looked at how best we can implement, how best we can integrate. and can RPA replicate those actions? So we had to tweak the processes and standardize them. And so we've used value stream mapping, process reengineering. That helped us drive it to the next level. Now we had to redefine and redesign process. When we had people who were doing the process for the last 15, 20 years, 30 years in a traditional way, and we had to demystify that. Now, we have also had to make some decisions to outsource some of the processes. So it was starting with finance, we were able to assess it, but we need to get this thought process across entire organization, which was difficult. However, the success that we had with the initial bots helped us improve our data, improve our processes, and KPIs. So, and we developed a in-house approach towards development, towards automation journey. We followed a very careful process, and then we never treated RPA as an in-silos organization trying to sell services. We integrated it with our functional departments, wherein we went and talked to them, explained about RPA, demonstrated few bots to them, and helped them understand that RPA is one of the solutions. Maybe they're leaning towards RPA, but we never were biased towards an RPA solution. So we were honest in terms of assessment and giving them the direction. Maybe ETL package would solve the problem, or maybe a middleware software will be much more efficient and cheaper when compared to implementing an RPA solution. So that's how we looked at it. So that helped us gain trust about RPA as such and the solution. So we have, again, this is more on the development life cycle that we followed, but finance and the CFOs were part of this journey, irrespective of what functional area it was, because that helped us to stay on top of the payback, stay on top of budget and quality. Then, how did we decide which initiatives to fund? So RPA, it got us all excited. We definitely wanted to hop on this journey. And which one do we start? So Alfred and I, we had a half-a-day workshop to understand, okay, what is more important for us? And then we defined what would be the criteria. Because the first session that we did with different functional leaders, we had almost close to 100 ideas of which one would we jump on. At the same time, we have to keep the excitement levels maintained so that adoption becomes easy. So we looked at strategic alignment. So we had some challenges on our customer side. So the customer complaints on invoicing. So those were the first ideas that we wanted to automate. Next, payback analysis. We looked at the processes where the payback was less than 1 year, nothing more than that. If it is more than 1 year, it's out of scope for now. Later on, we conquered them, but that's how we looked at it. And then it was easy to justify to the business when we had to go for a CapEx budget, so it makes it much easier. Then we looked at scalability. Now, this is our guardrail for any development that we're doing. Can we mimic the success? Can we scale this up across regions, across business lines, across product lines? So that's how we evaluated the ideas that came up during our discovery workshops. And then, other than that, we looked at standardization versus optimization. There were processes which were being done in a different way in different business units. We always looked at, okay, can a BPM team get involved first before RPA can come into play? So that way, we didn't sign up for things which are not in our scope at the beginning. So other than that, we leveraged offshore development and onshore development. So we had onshore team, which was maintaining relationship with the business, staying closer to the process, and we had offshore team, which is more on focused on development to keep our costs low. And that's how we were getting the payback quick. Yeah. Then, so some of the automation opportunities beyond finance. Again, we started with finance, but we've explored towards master data management, journal entry booking on the record to report, order to cash. We have worked on invoice processing, and also it improved our collections process, wherein we are able to integrate the entire process of invoicing to collections. The flow of information was also consistent. So the collections team didn't have to go back and check, did the order get invoiced or not? So we ensured that there's one source of truth. And there were a lot of synergies in terms of digitization of the process, and the metadata that we got out of these processes helped us drive the KPIs in the organization. So that is the hidden gem of RPA, which business leaders wouldn't understand when you're talking to them. You go and talk to a procurement guy, they wouldn't know. But when you come back and say, hey, average time it's taking for you to issue a PO is X, and we're trying to move towards Y, then they understand it. And that's possible because of the capability RPA has provided us from a metadata standpoint. So these are, I'm not going to go through all of this, but these are some of the ideas that we've explored, and they're beyond finance. Now, one approach that we followed right from beginning was modularized development approach. This helped us scale our solutions. So I can proudly say that our successive bots for invoicing, we were able to deploy it in less than 1/3 of the cost that we spent on the first bot. So that's where we've learned our lessons, we leveraged our experiences, and then we deployed it. So it was much easy for us to repeat the success. Now it's more than, it has moved from push to a pull, where the functional leaders are asking for us, when do we get our chance to do a bot? So that's the excitement. So it moved away from finance to supply chain, to order management, customer service, project management. These are some areas that we were able to expand our services. So overall, we've added about, this is one example, we call it, that's our first bot. We have about 80 bots right now. We just named for first 3 bots, it's Billy, so we call it Billy Bot. So just to keep the excitement there. So about 6,000 hours we have added capacity to the business, which helped us improve our customer service function and make the customer happy. So overall, opportunities and how we stand, our journey was standardization of the processes. We looked at automation, and intelligent automation as such, trying to bring in some rule-based, cognitive-based approaches towards development. And initially, we had to target the low-hanging fruits, which are more task-oriented. But that helped us convince the business, showcase to the business what RPA can do. Because it has so much capabilities, at times we would also not imagine until we have taken those first 10 steps, right? Then chatbots, this is the most recent, the GG chatbot that you talked about. So we have also embarked on the journey. We call it Finia chatbot, wherein through Teams, so we have 5 different SAP instances and 3 different AX6 instances. Imagine an HR person going into the systems to find the status of an invoice. It would be a nightmare for them. They wouldn't know, okay, how to look at it, right? But with Finia chatbot, they could just, using NLP, talk to the 6 systems and get details about an invoice, about a voucher, about a transaction. So next is, and this is all possible because of the work that we've done with RPA, digitization of the data, and establishing the routines and processes to get the data from the ERP systems to a data lake. And then other than that, we're also looking at process mining, process integration, API integration, and AI integration. So this is how we're trying to take this journey towards RPA and AI. So from, if you would see here, like we started with transactional processes, and we are moving towards more supervised learning, machine learning capabilities. Now, today we are talking about real-time closing, instant closing. I can tell that with data and automation, we were able to bring down our closing time period from 7 days to 3 days, which means, again, eventually these days I know we're talking about instant closing, real-time closing, with new ERP systems coming into play. But RPA will definitely be an enabler for that. And then real-time reporting and consolidation, that's another area that we are looking at, where we could have our real-time reporting of our KPIs, financials, so that the CFOs can drive the business during the month rather than at the end of the month trying to chase the targets. Then another area, let's shift from operational finance to strategic finance. So translation from strategic to operational data was tough, because the CFO would give us some numbers, and how do I relate to the lowest level when you're talking to the sales team or sales order or service team? RPA helped us establish that link to convert the strategic actions into operational actions. And then other than that, now we are more exploring about NLP, cognitive AI, and blockchain. I mean, we have not reached the blockchain part right now, but we are trying to establish the structure for it in terms of whether could we leverage it for contracts or for bank settlements. Those are some things that we're looking at. So this is about how our journey was, starting with finance, and today we are at 80+ bots, generating a lot of ROI for the business compared to the spend that we're having for that software and the human effort that's there. Thank you. Yeah.
Great. So thanks so much for the insights, guys. What we're going to do now is we're going to have a brief fireside chat. I'm going to ask a few questions, but this is going to give you all some time to be thinking about what questions you want to ask. Because again, I get asked all the time, hey, what are other fine arts organizations doing? want to hear from others. This is a great time in real time to get some feedback from all of them. So I'll bring them up on stage first. Great. So one of the things you talked about was how you started moving beyond finance into other areas. And I think the reason I get excited about finance is, sure, there are lots of opportunities to automate within finance, but I've often found that finance acts as the stewards for the rest of the business. And so I'm interested, maybe, Alfredo, in your perspective in terms of, what do you believe the role is of finance in driving automation and digital transformation across the entire company?
I think we are uniquely positioned in finance to be the champions and sponsors for this initiative. Data is what is our everyday bread, right? In finance, and we see the potential to how that data you can transform that into information and drive business performance. So we're really in the engine room, and we can be stewards of the data. We could be good stewards of the business, of the overall organization, and I think we have the responsibility to also lead by example. And I think if we're asking everybody to transform themselves, I think business starts at home, right? So.
Yeah, no, that's exactly when I was at the bank, it was the exact same thing. We led by example. Yeah. We had relationships across the entire business, so we thought, hey, we should prove it out first. And I think as I talk to customers, there are absolutely huge opportunities within finance. But at some point, when you've automated everything, you've leveraged Gen AI and machine learning, they become diminishing returns. And so the big benefit is really getting into the core operations and the core business itself. So second question, maybe Ram, I'll ask you, what have you seen are the approaches that have been most successful to really scale automation across the organization?
Well, our experience has taught us that we start small and aim for those low-hanging fruits first to translate those benefits for the business, and they become their use cases to expand further. And then also having a strong team is more important, especially who are ready to embrace this technology, because they will speak about RPA and what benefits they will bring. So that way you don't have to reach out and explain that. And another approach is casting a wide net so that the benefits reach to multiple functions. Then you're trying to connect the dots later. It's much easier for you. Yeah, that's how it works.
No, I think those are great insights. And yeah, I would agree with you as well. I think when people start out, I think, in my experience, I've seen where people start and they're like, let's take on the absolute most complex process in the entire organization, right? And probably not the best way to start, so usually picking something simple. What we did when we started was picked a very simple process, created a video, because the big challenge is people don't understand what automation can do, particularly in finance, right? We're not technologists. Yeah. And so being able to create like a super brief demo that just shows people this is what it is, they get excited, then just generating a big pipeline of ideas, and then obviously prioritizing those, and then really looking for the ones for scale. And then, as I said, ultimately moving beyond finance.
Yeah, just adding to that, people will get personal because they've been used to doing that process in a certain way. And when you go and tell them I'll automate, they'll get too personal and they're not opening up. But once you have the simple use cases, then you have convinced them, yes, this is where it's applicable, and they'll come forward and say, can I do this 2 steps through a bot? Or that's how it.
Yeah, we were worried too within finance that folks would feel threatened. Oh, is this going to replace my job? And I think people quickly realized, look, I've never seen a finance organization that says we have like unlimited staff and we have plenty of time. I mean, it's always, what can we do with fewer and fewer resources? So, and frankly, no one in finance wants to be, creating reports and sourcing data, right? So I found it as a great tool people got excited about it. And it was a great tool also to attract new people in because they want to be using the latest technology. So, I've seen it be more of a plus than something that people are nervous. And of course, everyone wants to do something Gen AI related these days. Yeah. Well, and speaking of which, so let me ask you about that. Obviously, we've heard a lot about Gen AI today. I think everyone's experimenting with right now. But, from your perspective, I know it's in the early days, but, Alfredo, how do you see Gen AI sort of changing the nature of use cases, in finance, but even beyond finance into the broader company?
I think automation, Gen AI are game changers for companies. I think we are in a similar stage or point in time as perhaps in the early 80s when ERPs were introduced, right? It's a big game changer. I do think that specifically within the finance function, machine learning is probably the most immediate application that we see in FP&A, accounting jobs. It is difficult in finance in general because you have to play within certain guardrails, right? Which are called the accounting standards, right? Or your external disclosures, right? So, and I think that's where machine learning can really come into play quite nicely. But at the same time, if I think of unsupervised AI, really Gen AI, I think the application could very well be in areas where it's too hard for us humans to connect the dots. So perhaps the audit function, right? Really like mining through reams of data to find that unusual fraudulent activity, right? Or risk management, really thinking with that part of the brain that you never use. I think that's where Gen AI could even today have an immediate application.
Yeah, I mean, that raises two thoughts. I mean, one is, I think, as we heard earlier today, I mean, there's a whole range of technologies, right, that you can apply to any solution. It's not any one technology, but I agree with you. I think the real power is going to be Gen AI combined with machine learning and other technologies because obviously you can use automation to automate basic processes, but what happens when you get to an exception processing, right? And so that's where you say, okay, well, that's the 10, 20% that we kick out and have someone perform. But if you looked at all the data and said, hey, if I'm processing an exception, you're probably processing it one of 5 ways, right? And if you look at what's driving those 5 ways, it's really a set of rules. So you could basically run the data through a machine learning model, process 80% of those exceptions, and then really focused on the real, challenging 20%. So I agree with you. I think we're going to hear a lot more about the combination of machine learning and Gen AI, because I think people hear Gen AI and they think that's all AI, right?
Yep.
But it's a combination. But that being said, I mean, Gen AI right now, I mean, there are so many possibilities that people haven't even thought of. I mean, some of the interesting ones I've heard about recently are like take financial planning analysis, right?
Yep.
So, I tell people, yeah, you could automate manual reports you create, but if it takes you 2 hours a month to create a report, I mean, you could automate that, but you're not going to get a huge return on investment. But all of a sudden that equation flips if you add Gen AI, right? Because now think about like forecast variance analysis or management discussion analysis where you feed in, again, in a secure manner, but all the company's data about your forecast, about your results, and are able to spit out an MD&A. Now, are you going to publish that? No. I mean, you're going to have someone still review it, but the ability to summarize that or to say, hey, what are the biggest drivers of forecast variance or what might be the biggest drivers of revenue growth in the future? I mean, that's where I get really excited. Or, I don't know if you have any additional thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it's on the FP&A side, it's 90%, back to your 80-20. I think 80% of what we do on FP&A is standard, it's predictable, right? That's ripe for automation and AI. Then that 20%, yeah, it's a new algorithms, but that's also where the human element still plays in, right? We saw it today, this morning, human to the power of AI, right? So I think I think it's a multiplier. It has been a multiplier for us, and we see it that way as well.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the use cases historically also focused on areas where there's high transaction processing, so like accounts payable, invoice processing. But the recent examples I've heard, like leveraging Gen AI, are around billing and collections, right? Which not only has an efficiency aspect, but obviously has a big implication on
Cash flow.
DSO and cash flow, and so the ability to feed in all the data about, let's say, a customer, whether it's a commercial or individual customer, their payment history, their transaction history, and be able to come up with a strategy around collections. Let's say if they go past due, a lot of again, just a lot of really exciting applications.
Absolutely.
Well, what I'd like to do is open it up to questions from the audience. One request, which is that you just raise your hand, and then since it's being recorded, I want to make sure I get a microphone over to you so everyone who's remote can also hear about your questions. So who wants the brave first person to ask? Oh, good, we got a lot of takers. Right.
So our company is not experimenting with generative AI, and I think there's a sense of fear around it because of anecdotes and stories about data leakage and big foundation models being trained off of user input. And even though some services are completely not like that because they will create a unique instance just for your company, there's still this mysticism around that and resistance around that. So I think you mentioned that you've experimented with Gen AI. So how did you overcome that barrier, that sort of security risk or the fear of security risk?
We're probably in the same stage right now as well. I think there's that we have the same concerns as well, right, on data security. The greatest concern that we have, which I'm sure you can relate to, is not being able to explain what the algorithms are doing, right? So I think it's upon all of us to really get ingrained and really familiarized. I think almost everybody here in this room knows how to deal with Microsoft Excel, right? I think we all need to become coders. I think that was a term that was used years ago, right? And I think we need to understand that, especially if we're going to be introducing that in the finance function. It is our duty to make sure that we're not inadvertently introducing code that would put our company at risk. So I share the same concern.
Yeah, it's a great question. In fact, when Gen AI became popular, everyone started hearing about it. I heard more companies come out with restrictions on the use of Gen AI than talking about how they're going to use Gen AI. Yeah. And it's for exactly the reasons you describe, right? Concerned about, is my data secure? You don't want to put your company data out in, ChatGPT. Is it accurate? Like, sort of like Wikipedia, it'd be fairly accurate, but, you're not sure exactly the level of accuracy. And so I think that's why I think that's frankly within the platform why I created the ability to infuse Gen AI within the platform, because obviously to the extent you're using the platform today, you already have comfort around the data security, right? Because the data is within the platform. The ability to control and provide guardrails how people use it, so they can all use it within how you've built the automation. So I think that's giving some customers earlier comfort around, okay, I know it's at least within those guardrails, but they still have the issue you mentioned around the data, right? At the end of the day, it's only as good as the data. So I think, as they talked earlier today, the ability to work with other organizations to create either your own data model using your own data, or a secure data model based on industry or whatever relevant data is really helping accelerate things. Do you have a question?
Thank you. It seems now there is hundreds of suppliers offering automation. How did you select automation anywhere? Comparing with other suppliers.
Okay. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'll let you.
It was clear that they were the best, right? So, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, we've assessed tools. It's not that we did assess the tools, and from a security governance standpoint, this qualified very well for us because we want to make sure it should be an on-premise one, because we deal with pharmaceutical customers and other customers. So we don't want any of our enterprise data going out. Other than that, AA definitely is a leader, because starting from in the last 3 years, we've done 80 bots, so much of productivity gain. It worked out very well for us. So.
Yeah, and I'll speak from an industry perspective and not within sales. but I think a lot of the customers, because obviously I talk to customers who are like trying to decide what to use, and I think a lot of the reason they end up working with us, just the integrated suite of capabilities, because you need more than one capability. Second, obviously, it has, you'd assume, all the right security and governance. That's sort of a given. And then really, a lot of it was ease of use. Because even if you aren't going to go to citizen development, right, and you're not going to have everyone develop their own bots, just the ability, like if I'm a manager, particularly in finance, I feel like I'm just as responsible at understanding what my bots are doing as I do what my employees are doing, right? And so the ability, even if you aren't a coder, you can see the process flow, you understand exactly what your bots are doing, you have an audit trail. I think I've seen that's been really critical as well. So let me go back here. One sec.
Thank you so much. Going back to the earlier point about the risk profile with these foundation models and the risks and concerns. Are you aware of any government mandates or regulations coming down the pipe that would influence the managing and the caring of these foundation models in finance?
Ooh, that's a very good question. I am not sure. I do know that the federal government does have, and we do business with the federal government. The federal government has certain requirements when it comes to cybersecurity, and that's something that we would consider in any implementation, right? To make sure that we comply. Our headquarters is not too far from DC, so I think the regulatory environment and the legislative environment is very dynamic. So, but I haven't heard the latest.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to this as well because actually, I support obviously the banking industry, which is highly regulated. And so it's interesting because, even when like RPA came out or any other technology, I mean, the regulators are learning at the same time, right? Because they realize that all their, the companies they regulate are looking at the technologies. And so it's interesting, like if you take the case of banks, I mean, actually like the OCC and other regulators have said, hey, they're aware and supportive. Now that being said, you obviously have to have a controlled environment and try to ensure that you're not introducing bias, but they realize that there are a lot of benefits if used in the right way. So I'd say, regulators are coming up to speed just as all of us are. But we've seen in some industries, more support of that because they realize the benefit as long, again, as it's in a controlled manner, but it's evolving.
Ken, if I may add my 2 cents, I just was gathering my thoughts. We're a German company, and the EU a few years ago introduced some regulations on data privacy, especially related to consumer and individual data privacy. As a means to comply with that, not to just not to put the company at any risk whatsoever, we have stayed away from individual data. So we build kind of data firewalls or middle layers in our data structures. So if there's any private information that is not, let's say, shared with the bots or with the AI.
And ultimately, I think the ultimate guardrail, frankly, is human in the loop, right? Yeah. That's why we talk about Copilot, because at the end of the day, I mean, sure, there are some use cases where you could automate all the way through, but at the end of the day, generally, you're going to come out with some output that's going to be Gen AI related, but you're going to have someone looking at that, certainly early on, just to make sure that it makes sense and you're comfortable with it. Yeah.
So we talked about earlier about the strategic direction of using Gen AI and the risk of using that one. But I'm just curious, how, on the other hand, how do we use Gen AI? Like what process, what kind of infrastructure? Because using bot, I can understand you can easily connect to your ERP, do some closing, reconciliation, or feeding some data. But Gen AI, like at least to me, is largely a conversational interface. Do we know if there's anything that we could connect it somehow? For example, reading a contract, getting data from the contract, and then booking an entry or sending out invoice. Something like that can actually connect these two dots together here.
I mean, so we're still experimenting, as I said. We started with our conversational chatbot, which uses data for it, and it learns from the kind of questions that you ask for. So we follow the same approach, starting small and starting with data where we're not going to have privacy issues. First thing, we've looked at our master data, aligned our master data across systems, defined those data definitions very clearly. Because in SAP, you have different fields, and you have Microsoft systems, they're in completely different tangent. So you got to align that. So that's the first step that we did. Second, can we relate the data one-to-one? We looked at that. Then understood, okay, do we need to push entire data into it? No. Then we identified that micro fields that we need to push it in. Because when you're talking about data from SAP, again, you don't want this to be millions of rows getting into it, because that kills the efficiency of it. And it might show different patterns. That's how we approach, and then we solve the chatbot issue where avoiding getting into multiple systems. So to answer your question, yes, we've defined a clear data structure, identified defined the data elements and the definitions very clearly, merged the data sets. Again, this all happens in the back end through RPA. And that's where RPA plays a role, and then goes through the engine for us. I mean, there we are leveraging the Microsoft OpenAI platform for us.
Yeah, I definitely take advantage as well. You know, we have two major sponsors here, AWS and Google. So I would definitely talk to them. They're up on the 5th floor, because obviously that's what we try to do, is infuse some of the, you know, best in class. And so that's why, you know, we're able to like pour it in, you know, AWS, Google, what have you, into the platform. Because obviously they have a lot of that expertise as well in terms of not only the AI, but the data models, et cetera. So I definitely encourage everyone to talk to them if you haven't already. I think there was another question. Yep.
Thanks. Yeah, just a scalability question. You mentioned you went from 0 to 80 bots. Can you just comment on how you organized around that, really around the upfront ideation and prioritization?
Okay.
I'll take it, yeah.
Sure.
We did not select any process that would be unique, right? So we selected. When we had our first meetings with users and really like trying to gather their input, we had a funnel of 100 plus, if not more. And that was 3 years ago.
3 years ago.
Right? Now the funnel is 200 plus, having already implemented close to 100, right? And we selected processes to automate that would go across multiple business units, across multiple geographies. So then the development cost is one, and it's not, you don't have to replicate it, right? And then it's a business-wide benefit. The benefit as well that it has is that then the time to deploy, it's almost instantaneous. Not really, right, because you need to make adjustments here and there, but it really expedites the ability to roll it out fast, and then users buy into the concept, and then they become your greatest advertisers, right, just with real life examples.
Yeah, and the key as well is as organizations, you know, grow into much larger and higher scale automations, you also see the, you know, whatever they call it, center of excellence or what have you, expand and evolve over time. Initially, it might be 1 or 2 people. Eventually, it becomes maybe slightly larger, centralized, and then goes to federal. But my point being that you really need to evolve the governance and, you know, organization and program over it as the program expands too, because they're a key element of that. All right, we have time for one last question.
Hopefully this is the easy one. On the earlier point you guys made around finance driving automation across the company, can you comment a little bit on kind of the role of the executive leadership team and what approaches worked most effectively, whether it was top down or bottoms up?
I think it's, you need a sponsor. That helps a lot in the C-suite. In that case, that was me. But the real buy-in, I think it comes from the subject matter experts in the organization that you're able to convert. When we're selecting our processes to automate, we're looking for change agents, folks that we could convert. There's always going to be folks that are on the fence, right? And it's going to be much harder to convert. I think it was very critical for us to find those change agents and invest time with them, and then make it this initiative or that area, that improvement, be theirs, not really ours. And that is not a concept unique to automation, right? I think it's a change management concept. When you get the buy-in from the folks that are actually doing the job, the potential is limitless.
Well, I want to thank everyone for all the great questions, and let's also give a round of applause for our moderator. Thank you.